Hello, students. All right, so I'm recording this lecture um, just to give you a little, just to kind of pull together the pieces you need to think about doing your prep step for the paper. So this is all stuff I've talked about before, but I want to have it in one place. Um, One of the main problems I've noticed in the papers before is people being confused about what expressive individualism and utilitarian individualism are. So I'm going to spend a good bit amount of time on that. This is in lecture 3. You can find it in the Canvas folder. I'm just going to hit a few things. So I'm assuming you were in class and you had this lecture. So I'm not going to go into gory detail, but I'm going to hit a few things. Okay, so the short story is moral sources are these things that exist outside the self that we can appeal to. And advertisements often appeal to them. So that's the purpose of the paper. So, in general, just some background on moral sources. Excuse me, it's these things outside the self that define what is good. And who we are is oftentimes defined in connection to these moral sources. So they overlap with our sense of self most of the time. Okay, and it shapes how we relate to the world, how we relate to other people, and I would argue, and other people would, that these moral sources have a huge impact on things like our value for capitalism and how consumption works. And so the first paper is trying to get you to think about how it relates to advertising. So a very concrete, specific example. Okay, so moral sources are these conceptions of higher good that inform how we think about ourselves. You might think typically about these as being religious things. It can include that, but it's broader than that. So for a lot of people, like their conception about they're a good American, that conception of they're part of this country and the good of the republic, that's a moral source. Many people, they look at tech entrepreneurs and they see more than just businessmen. They see visionaries, people that deserve our respect. There's some tech bros out there, to be in the vernacular, that almost worship some of these guys. So, like Steve Jobs, or the new one would be Elon Musk. And then, if you think about nature, even nature, lots of times, the way we conceptualize it is idealized and kind of put on a pedestal that is more than just an objective truth. We're taking in nature and kind of making a moral source out of it. That's not to say it's not true, it's just to say that it's idealized. So we talked in class about the proposition that all men are created equal. And it's kind of two things. Like on the one hand, people would say, yeah, that was written by a slaveholder, so maybe that's not true. But on the other hand, it has taken on a life of its own, and in common discourses and common discussions about politics, that carries weight. And when you make an appeal to equality, people have a hard time saying, "Oh, that doesn't count." They feel the pull of that too, and they try to justify their arguments in terms of belief in equality. Okay, so this is some background. I'm going to kind of skip for now. All right, so as we talked about in class, there's some older moral sources. Appeals to status and fame, power and wealth, beauty and attractiveness. Those are kind of hard to deny. And there's some older moral sources that tend to be more communal. So some religious traditions are like that. Civic republicanism is like that. That's not the Republican Party. That's the idea that we, the people, are going to create a government and we are going to write our own laws, and we're going to be self-ruling. We don't need a monarch. We don't need a king to tell us what to do. So these are both ideals that kind of point to us typically beyond ourselves. And these are not, certainly you can morally critique each of these. We already mentioned the slavery thing, but there's still these ideals that are out there. Okay, then the two that I want you to focus on, I think you can get the most mileage out for most advertising, are these ones that come about in modernity. So the first one we'll talk about is utilitarian individualism. I have a picture of a guy with utility belt as kind of a metaphor for this. But the idea is that there's certain things out there that give you capacities that let you do things in the world that make you more of an individual. So for some people, just a watch lets them kind of have command of time, command of their schedule. For other people, like a phone, a mobile phone. Some of you, I know, this will shock you, but there was a time when I didn't own a mobile phone, and when I finally got one, it was kind of liberating in some sense. So this is the moral source that takes the individual is really important, and it tries to increase the efficiency of the individual, the agency of the individual. It's where we have this ideal of self-mastery. So you're in charge of your own destiny. And advertisers will appeal to this, saying that this device or this house or this car is going to give you these capacities you wouldn't otherwise have. So inside this moral source is this idea of overcoming limitations, of seizing the day and seizing control of things. It's taming complexity. So you see this in different views of education. The older view of education is you learn how to think and you learn the liberal arts. The more modern view is that education is career training, and if you're not majoring in something that's tied to a specific career, then you're kind of adrift. I don't believe that, but you see this in the way we relate to the world. We'll come up with solutions to problems like what's the most efficient way to get lumber, just to clear cut the forest. The most efficient way to raise food, we have these factory farms. So it's kind of this instrumental, what can I get out of this, not really thinking about the bigger picture. And I'll note that Wachtel critiqued this idea where we put a lot of weight on the individual being able to produce things and consume things. It's a very utilitarian kind of outlook. You get meaning through production and consumption. Okay, expressive individualism, this is overgeneralizing, but utilitarianism kind of has this hard practical edge. Expressive individualism has this edge about who am I and what do I need to express about myself to realize my highest ideals. So you've read Emerson. Emerson definitely is under the sway of this expressive individualism. For Emerson to be who he truly is, he has to express things, and he has to cut connections to tradition, to culture, to history, all that kind of stuff. He wants to stand on his own 2 feet and define his own existence. So we have the ideal here of you're going to achieve self-fulfillment through self-realization. You have to express something. You have to become something that really makes you who you are. There's these ideas of authenticity, rejecting conformity, being unique. You see lots of advertisings appealing to that. Fashion, just for example, you don't want to wear something that's just completely unknown to other people, but you want to have your own take on some trend. You want to get clothes that other people will kind of recognize as giving you a symbolic standing in a certain kind of culture or status. Lots of times the way we think about family and home now, it's this expression of who we are. We want our family to be, secured in a certain kind of space that allows us to have privacy and to achieve a certain kind of authenticity as a family. So a huge part of this comes up and think about like music, and if you think about like teenagers, especially tend to be very into music. It's defining who they are and who they listen to, and oftentimes it's different than their parents. But lots of musical expressions, artistic expressions capture this expressive individualism stuff. Okay, so There's also, I'm just going to mention another one, a more modern source that is not used as much, but you still see it in some ads, is this attunement with nature. So this came up when we were talking about Wes Jackson, but it has its roots in Romanticism and the scientific revolution and evolution. And it's just kind of what it sounds like. You're going to be more complete or more fulfilled if you can connect with nature, if you're in tune with nature, if you're aligned with it. So you'll see this in different kinds of advertisements that are presenting their products as more natural, as more wholesome. You see this as oftentimes it's a rejection of certain kinds of instrumentalism or dominance. It's saying we're not going to be commercialized, we're going to be attuned to what's natural, that kind of stuff. Okay, so let me switch gears and look at the paper assignment. Give me a second to get there. Okay, so paper info is right here in the Canvas homepage. Okay, and then what I'm talking about today is the paper assignment, the videos you're going to use, and the prep step. So, the paper assignment is here. So this is not what you're doing first. The first two steps are you're going to select the ad and you're going to do the prep step. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But I want you to have the picture of the paper in mind as you're doing this stuff. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to have a paragraph where you kind of explain how ads appeal to moral sources. You're going to then describe the ad just by itself, calling the reader's attention to certain important elements in the ad, what's depicted, what the story is. You might get into some of the details about the text that describes something or the colors or any of that kind of stuff. Then you're going to analyze the moral sources. And the two that you will likely draw on the most are utilitarian individualism and expressive individualism. And it's going to be like this. This ad is appealing to utilitarian individualism. Here's my evidence. And then you go through and say, it appeals to this kind of thing. That's utilitarian individualism. It also appeals to this. It appeals to this. It's suggesting to the individual that if they do such and such, that they buy this product, they're going to have more capacities as an individual. Okay, so that's the paper. Let's talk now, go back here to the assignment. Where am I? Okay, so the videos for that paper. I would suggest you look through at least 4 or 5 of these, and you're not trying to find the ad that you like the best. You're trying to find the ad that you think you can explain in terms of its moral sources. So, for example, if you take the Mercedes, the strong character, this ad for this SUV, you're going to want to watch the ad and think, could I talk about expressive individualism being appealed to here? Can I talk about it appealing to utilitarian individualism, etc.? There's an ad for the Fit. There's a Nike ad. There's some ads about cars. There's a Red Bull ad. You can pick your own ads if you like, but I require that you run them by me to start with and get my approval that it's an ad that will work. I don't want you to be working with an ad that is not going to work well for this assignment. Okay, so you're going to watch some of these ads. And then, let's see here. Okay, and then the prep step you're going to work on. This is the thing you're going to turn in first to kind of get you thinking about the assignment. And this is the thing that I'm going to give you feedback on. So if you put some time and energy into this, you will get better feedback from me that'll help you write a better paper. So that is my advice, that you take that seriously. Okay. First thing you need to do is tell me which ad you're using. Just describe it or give me the number from the YouTube playlist. And then highlight which of the moral sources we're talking about you think the ad's using. I want you to pick at least 3. In the paper, you might just do 2, but for this purpose, I want you to do 3. You're going to describe each of those things in themselves, not as they relate to the ad. Just say if you pick civic republicanism, utilitarian individualism, and expressive individualism, I want you to write a little paragraph for each of these that convinces me you know what those moral sources are about. All right. Then for the actual ad, what you're going to do is describe the moral source, say expressive individualism, and then you're going to tell me the elements in the ad that relate to that. So expressive individualism, maybe it's, okay, this Apple Watch lets you play certain kinds of music, and that music expresses who you are. Or the Apple Watch lets you set certain kinds of goals, and that enables you to show that you're the kind of person that's always striving for excellence. Then utilitarian individualism. You might say, okay, that you might say that the watch gives you certain kind of capacities, certain kind of functions, certain kinds of abilities that you wouldn't otherwise have. You not only know what time it is, but you can play music, you can monitor your heart rate. The technology is very utilitarian. It enables individualism because you can wear it and take it with you, and it connects to your phone. So all that kind of stuff. All right, that is it. So your goal is to think carefully about the moral sources and think about the elements in here. And note these boxes expand, so you might have a good bit more than this. But if you give some serious thought to this, the kind of feedback I like to give is like, yeah, this is good, this is good. You might also think about this, this, and this. So, okay, that's it. I hope that's helpful. And I will, I'm available if you have questions. And I hope this gets you a good start on the paper project.